starting off with those stages in counseling. How do they show themselves in our counseling room?
Well, I think this is a very interesting topic in terms of applying a theory to practice. And if I could take you back in time, Ken, to when you did your introduction course, sometimes it's called a level 2 here in the UK or here in England. When we started off our counselling skills, we usually asked just to sit with a partner and just practice listening skills. There's no stages in it. It's just a case of getting used to listening more than you speak, and to be able to really tune into someone, to start that empathic attunement that is so important in counselling. And then as we move through our training, we begin to realise that it's not just a case of sitting and listening. There's actually a active structure to counselling skills, using counselling skills, whether you are just using them as skills or if you're using them as a counsellor. And those are stages. And the reason we have stages in a counselling encounter is so that a therapist can manage the time allocated and can not direct, but can put a structure in place that the client can work within. So both the client and the counsellor works within it. And those are called stages. And a very simple stage to look at is beginnings, middles, and end. And if you're doing your kind of level 3 or your certificate in counselling, as our good friends in Scotland do, it might be that you start off with a contract so that the person knows exactly what they're getting, and the time allocated, and confidentiality, and that this is the space for them. And then you start off with that, so people know exactly what they're getting, and then you move through that place where people are talking about, what's on their mind, and you may be using skills of silence, attending, reflecting and paraphrasing, active listening skills. And then as the hour or the time allocated in that one session comes to an end, you're then looking at ending, giving someone some time or a time indication. There's a few minutes left, so that the ending isn't abrupt and they don't feel cut off or discounted. And then eventually you end the session, and that's the end of the arc of that therapy. And then when you go into level 4, that extends, because you're using that not just in one session with a client, but through a series of sessions with a client, beginnings, middles, and endings, Ken.
It's interesting. And I like the way that you've kind of drawn attention to that, Rory, that yes, we can say, of course, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end in every single session we have with the client. But there's also, if we take the group of sessions, so all of the sessions we might have with that client, we're also going to track the beginning, middle, and ending within that as well in the stages of counseling. And for me, it's the beginning bit makes a lot of sense, because a beginning, if you think about a film, if you think about a book, if you think about a new relationship or a new friend that you might meet, there's going to be a process of getting to know who they are and them getting to know who you are. So if we were reading a good book, they would be defining the characters. They'd be giving us a bit of the character's background, and they wouldn't be going too much into the meat of the story. They would be kind of giving us a reference. And the same is true when we're counseling. We need to, I guess, consider, if we're looking at the beginning stage of counseling, and the beginning stage, if we're looking at an arc of sessions, could be 2, 3, could even be 4 sessions, depending on who that client is and how that relationship feels within the therapy room. And within that beginning phase, as you've already said, Rory, we're going to be doing the paperwork and the housekeeping, as it were, in terms of our contracting. And we do that, as we've spoken so many times before, to kind of level the playing field so that that client understands what we understand. They understand the arena in which we are working, what the boundaries look like. So that's part of that beginning. But then when we look at the counseling skills that we might use in that beginning phase, we are, as you've called them out already, Rory, we're using active listening. We are showing that we are there and that we are attentive to the person who's bringing their materials, keeping in mind it kind of could be quite nerve-wracking for them in those early sessions, coming in, meeting a complete stranger and then kind of being expected to bring parts of their lives, maybe difficult or challenging parts of their lives. We're there to build that relationship, to build the trust, and it's called rapport. We are doing rapport building within those early stages, and great skills, skill of silence, as you've said, non-verbal communication, showing that you're listening, leaning your body in, eye contact when it is appropriate, reflection, just reflecting back what they're bringing to you, paraphrasing. And what do these skills do? Well, they instill in the speaker that is coming to us that they are being heard. They're being heard. If we're paraphrasing back and we're choosing an emotion or something that they may have brought that's important to them, we're not just parroting, we are paraphrasing, or we are reflecting back, and they're hearing it and they're going, wow, this person is really listening to me. They really get me. And that is what builds the trust. It breaks those barriers that we have in everyday life where we're kind of quite guarded as we go out there. And it's a really important part of the counseling journey. And I guess in the same way as within a new relationship, Rory, let's say I met somebody and I thought, oh, that's quite an attractive person. It would be pretty inappropriate for me to, after 2 drinks, to say, you know what, I think we should get married. I really think we should get married. It's too much and it's far too soon. It doesn't belong in the beginning phase of a relationship. And similarly, within the beginning phase of a counseling session, there are certain skills that we might either not use or use with reservation and skill as a mature therapist, maybe. But we would maybe try to avoid high challenge in those early stages, because that client being so delicate in those early stages could easily fracture, run away. Wow, okay, hold on, I feel very challenged here, and that could kind of get them to take a step back, Rory.
Absolutely, Ken. And I like that you've talked about the appropriate use of skills through the arc of an engagement, because you're absolutely spot on. You know, the skills you'd use in a more mature 5, 6, 7 sessions in maybe are going to be slightly different to those in the early stages. And you touched on the role of challenge. Challenge it should only be used, I think, when the relationship is built, there's trust there, you sort of know each other. And even then, I think it has to be used quite kind of sparingly and with a lot of thoughtfulness, because that can be kind of real. Well, you know, challenge, it clues in the name, it's challenging to the client. And one skill that we've yet to discuss, of course, is summarizing, because as we move to the end of a session, we summarize. It's a longer paraphrase, and that allows the client to have something to take away with them. That's going to be fresh on their mind as they leave the therapy room or leave the engagement. And that allows for something that's often unspoken, I think, in therapy. And that is that they have something to take away and reflect on through the week. And how often, Ken, have we heard as practitioners, clients coming back to us, you know, on maybe a subsequent session, who say, you know, at the end of last session, you know, you kind of summed up and you said to me, they usually say, you've said to me, and I've been thinking about this and I'm not sure if that's right, or actually you've got a point there. Yeah. And that's sometimes where the majority of work is done. And I think that managing the arc of a session is really important to allow the client to have something to think about, to reflect on in between. And when it comes to skills, so if you're listening to this and you've got to make a recording for your tutor, it's really important that you show a wide range of skills. The awarding bodies usually say a minimum or a maximum of skills. Some awarding bodies do, some awarding bodies don't. So you're actually demonstrating your use of skills, but also a skillful beginning and a skillful end. And you know, when you come to write your assignment, you're almost certainly going to be asked, why is it important to have a beginning? Why is it important to have a middle? What are you going to be doing in the middle of that session? Why is it important to have an ending? And, you know, it's important to have a beginning because everything has to begin somewhere. I'm always reminded, Ken, when we start counselling, it's a bit like an opening curtain of a theatre where you open and, you know, you are on the stage with your clients, and I'm not suggesting that you're acting, but there is that kind of tenseness, if you like, of where's this going? Who are we going to be? What is the relationship going to look like? Which direction are we going to travel? Neither of us know that until we begin. And then you begin with the contract that says to the client, this is what I can offer. These are the limits of confidentiality. This is how you're welcomed here in the room. And then it begins. And then you move through looking at that difficult material, being thoughtful, being curious, maybe in some cases, using questions sparingly. And as the session comes to an end, because we don't want sessions to go on for 3 or 4 hours, we're looking at the time, we say, just got about 10 minutes left. I'm aware I've got about 10 minutes left. And that helps the client then think about the ending and the fact that they're going to have to leave the therapy room. Really, really important. And I don't think I can speak about endings without thinking about some of the rookie errors that I made. Certainly I made as a student, which was you get to the end and you say we just come to the end now, and then you say to the person who's the client, if it's one of your colleagues or the person you're helping, you say, is there anything else I can help you with? And you go, well, actually, I've got this other problem, and you've come to the end of the session. And the students I taught, we had a lot of fun with that because they say, well, what do I do now? And I said, well, clearly, when it comes to the end, just let the end come and then just disengage, because obviously if you ask someone if there's anything else, they may very well likely say that. So it is a skill in itself, managing that arc, managing the kind of theatre, for want of a better phrase, of therapy, beginning, middle, and end. And like everything we do, it's in service of the client, Ken.
It is. And you're speaking about this and speaking about if you're a student and if you're doing recordings or if you're working with your peers. But similarly, if you're a seasoned practitioner, maybe the challenge here is to revisit that beginning, middle, and end. Maybe have a look at your caseload and ask yourself the question, where am I at with this client? Where am I at with this client? Where am I at with this client? Am I in the beginning phase, the middle phase, or the ending phase? When we're looking at a session independently, it kind of makes sense, and it still needs to be managed carefully and professionally, the beginning, the middle, and the end, as Rory has just said, and that kind of reflecting against all of the sessions that we might have with that person. And I was thinking, you've spoken about the end. I just want to visit the middle for a bit. And first of all, how might we know that we're in that middle phase? How might we know that we might use those more advanced skills, such as immediacy, challenge, asking more open questions of this client? And a great indicator for myself is looking at the client themselves and seeing how they appear and how they present themselves in your therapy room. You may see in the very beginning they might be quite nervous. You notice their hands are maybe ringing. They don't know where to put their hands. They might use words like, well, I'm a little bit nervous. I've never told anybody this. I don't know how to tell you this. I don't know if I should. That's the kind of language that we might see in that beginning phase when we're building that trust, where we're being gentle and being more of a listener and feeding back that we hear. We're working with very, very deep levels of empathy and showing that we truly understand in that beginning phase. That's what we might see within the client. We may see it in their body language. They may shun away from us. They may sit facing away from us. They may cross their arms. So we're really open to that body language. So that's what we might see as a presentation for we're in the beginning phases. And that can be 1 session. It can be 3 sessions. It depends who that client is. It is that idiosyncratic relationship in that it's different with each. So we can't say on session 3, now we're in the middle. Even if there's 6 sessions, it does not necessarily mean that at session 3 you're now you may have a client who needs more gentleness in those early, and there's sometimes that we get to the end of 6 sessions which were allocated where we need to plan further journey for this client because they're not at the point that they feel well served at that stage. So then when we move into that middle phase, what might we see? Well, we might see a more relaxed client. We might see them settling down in the chair, being more open. We might see them talking and moving their hands to kind of indicate what's going on for them, as opposed to holding their hands clenched. So there might be less mindful of how they are holding their body. They might turn more into us. They might make more eye contact. And of course, these are all mights. It depends on who that person is. There's not a checklist that indicates that they are in the middle, but we're looking for the signs of this. And a really good sign for me is when a client comes in and speaks in a more free manner, and you kind of alluded it to it, Rory. You might do a summary at the end of a session. The client may go away and they may come in, and if they come in and they're going, you said last week, and we were talking about last week, and I've noticed in my dealings this week, and blah, 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 and you can see they're on a roll. They're going there. That trust is built. They're now here, and they are freely sharing who they are within this threat-free environment that we've created in the opening, in those beginning phases. We're now in the middle. We're in the place where we're going to really delve deep into the material. We're going to maybe use more questions. We're maybe going to use immediacy, where we bring how we might feel about something into the session. And I think that's an important phase of the counseling. It's where a lot of the work is done. And of course, then we need to recognize that there is an ending. And if we have open sessions that go on forever, and of course there are many that have been in therapy, maybe psychotherapy, for many years, 10 years, 15 years, and continue to go on a weekly basis, there we would just acknowledge the ending of each session. But if we do have a set ending, we would be acknowledging that ending within that middle session. Well, we'd do it firstly in the beginning when we're setting the contract, but we would also do it during the middle session, just acknowledging the ending of all of the sessions. And then if we don't have a cap, 6 sessions, so we've got flexibility in that, we might acknowledge the ending when a client starts to show that they have developed, that they have changed, that they have got what they initially came in for. They might come in and their initial presentation is, I'm really struggling with this. I'm hoping to get over that. And we might get to a point where we're going, I recognize when you came in, you mentioned that you were really struggling with X, and what you've just shared in today's session suggests that's really loosening up for you. And I can't help but recognizing that that's what you came in for. And perhaps this is an indicator that we may be coming to the end of our times together, because we don't want to create that dependence. And then we would go into the ending where a lot of, within the ending, we would be recognize the ending is coming. We would be summarizing not just the session we're in, but maybe the sessions we've had together. When you came in, it was like this, and then we worked through this, and then you had this breakthrough, and now we're at this place. And I wonder, as we come to the end now, where you might be going forward and what that looks like for you. Raw.
Yeah, I absolutely can. And I like the fact that you've spoken about long-term engagements, because in a long-term engagement, as a therapist, I think one needs to not become complacent. Because at the beginning of therapy, I think there's quite an intensity. At the beginning of the engagement, you and your client are sat opposite each other trying to work out who you are. And then as the arc of therapy starts to form and you go into that middle piece, you're getting a good idea of who you are. And the client is getting a good idea of who you are, to be honest, because you're building a relationship. And it's really important, I think, to stay tuned into the client, to keep that empathic attunement. And I think, in my experience, it can be easy to drift a little bit. That's why good supervision is important, because my supervisor said to me on more than one occasion, what's happening in this relationship, Rory? And if you can't work out where you are and where the client may be, are you actually, to want to a better phrase, in the game? Are you connected? Are you in tuned to the client? And I think you're absolutely right. There is a bit of a debate whether we shouldn't be making ourselves redundant or not. And I think that really relies on the client. But we have to balance that out with autonomy. We don't want to keep people in therapy longer than they need to be, especially if it's paid therapy. There's an ethical dimension to that. So, I think you're right. We should be listening for signs that the client has got what they came for. And also the fact that, they're now able to be autonomous people and go out into the world. If we're thinking of person-centered kind of methodology, the idea that they're self-actuated. They've harnessed their own actualizing tendency. So we must be very careful in that middle piece to stay attuned to really work with the clients and not kind of get, I don't know, complacent and say, oh, well, they're going to be talking about this week. And no, that's not right. They're going to be talking about something that's really important to them, and you need to be in with them. And I think it's a fascinating topic, the arc of therapy. And, Ken, it's something that comes up in our Facebook group quite a lot, which is why I put it into the podcast today. And if you're not a member of our Facebook group, if you go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor, you'll find us. We're a closed group. If you knock on the door, our moderators will let you in and can join thousands and thousands of like-minded people talking about the world of counselling and psychotherapy, students. There's qualified colleagues. There's also supervisors and tutors. And there's huge debates goes on about really interesting topics. And I have to say, the arc of therapy comes up more often than not, Ken.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rory. There's also a super duper handout. Go to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab. It's episode 245. Rory has prepared a handout for you that you can download free of charge on the stages of counselling. It's really worth having those, popping them in a file, whether you're a student to reflect back on when you do your assignments or your recorded skill sessions. But if you're a qualified therapist, these are really good base theories that are really worth revisiting. As I said before, if you have a caseload, maybe the challenge is where are my clients? When you've got somebody in the room with you, are they in the beginning, middle, or ending phase? And am I serving them in the best way within the phase that I see that they are in? And of course, it's great to take into supervision. I've got this client, and I can still see on session 3 they still seem to be in that forming, that beginning stage. They seem timid. It's really a rich area to delve into. The skills we use within the arc of those sessions, so important. If you've listened to the Counselling Tutor podcast before, and Rory and I, you're going to know that I love skills. I wrote the book, Basic Counselling Skills, a student guide, which is recommended reading on so many training providers. And I've also created a little personal project called Counselling Skills Academy. And what we've built on there is 6 full sessions. They're real sessions of client and counselor material, and it beautifully matches the arc of beginning, middle, and end. The counselor there is Sally Ann. She is absolutely amazing. She holds a master's degree. She's been counseling for many years. She's a clinical supervisor. We contracted to be able to use this information for educational purposes. So that's counsellingskillsacademy.com, who incidentally are the sponsors of Theory in Practice.